Emily Hart had lived on her father's farm for as long as she could remember. The farm stood far away from the town, surrounded by endless fields, old fences, and dusty paths that stretched out toward the hills. To most people, the farm might have looked peaceful, a place where the sunrise painted the land in warm colors, and the wind carried the smell of grass. But for Emily, the farm often felt like a quiet cage. She was 17, old enough to understand the world better, yet young enough to still feel unsure about her place in it. Her father, Walter Hart, had always been a hard-working man. He woke before the sun and worked until the sky turned dark again. He wasn't unkind by nature, but years of stress, bills, and the pressure to keep the farm running had worn him down. He rarely smiled, rarely talked, and rarely noticed how Emily felt. He wasn't the type to sit down and ask about her day or to listen when she wanted to share a small worry. He cared in his own silent way, but his silence left Emily feeling invisible. Every morning, she helped him with chores, feeding the animals, collecting eggs, carrying buckets of water, and sometimes spending hours repairing fences. She had grown strong and capable, but she had also grown tired. Not physically tired, but tired in the way that happens when someone feels unseen for too long. She heard her friends at school talk about dreams of college, jobs in the city, and exciting futures. Emily had dreams too, but they felt distant, like stars she could see but not reach. Even though the farm was isolated, she loved certain parts of it. She loved walking barefoot on the cool grass when her father wasn't watching. She loved the sound of birds in the morning and the way the barn cats would follow her around like they owned the place. But she wanted more freedom, more choices, and more life. She felt like every day was the same, and every path she tried to imagine for herself led back to the same place. Her father's farm. One afternoon, she asked her father if she could go to a small event happening in the nearby town, a gathering where students from different schools would attend. It was nothing wild or loud, just music, games, and a chance for young people to meet others their age. Emily rarely asked for anything, but the moment she mentioned it, Walter shook his head before she even finished speaking. "We have work," he said, wiping his hands and not looking at her. "That's not important." Emily felt her heart sink. It wasn't just about the event. It was about the fact that she never had a say in her own life. She stood there quietly after his answer, watching him walk away to fix a broken gate. She wanted to argue, but she knew it wouldn't help. He wasn't angry at her. He was simply stuck in his own worries, unable to see hers. That night, after finishing all the chores, Emily sat on the porch alone. The sky was full of stars, bright and clear. She stared at them and wondered what it would feel like to live in a place where she could make her own choices. She imagined waking up one morning and deciding her own future, choosing what to study, where to go, who to meet. The thought gave her a strange mix of hope and sadness. Her father stepped onto the porch for a moment, but he didn't say much. He asked if she had finished her work, and when she nodded, he simply went back inside. Emily watched the door close and realized how wide the distance between them had grown, even though they lived in the same house. The next morning, things felt normal at first. Emily fed the animals, swept the barn, and gathered eggs. But as the day went on, her father became increasingly irritated. A piece of equipment broke, and he muttered to himself while trying to fix it. When he couldn't get it working, he grew frustrated, and even though Emily wasn't the cause, she felt the tension pointed at her. They moved around each other without talking, each trapped in their thoughts. Later in the afternoon, while helping him load boxes onto a truck, Emily accidentally dropped one. It wasn't a big mistake, and nothing broke. But her father let out a heavy sigh, the kind that carried more disappointment than anger. Emily tried to apologize, but before she finished speaking, he turned away and muttered something under his breath. It wasn't harsh, but it still made her feel small. It was in that moment, standing in the dust with the sun beating down on her and her father's back turned toward her, that something clicked inside Emily. She realized she couldn't keep living this way, feeling unseen, unheard, and stuck in a life she didn't choose. She didn't want to run away forever, but she needed space, a breath of fresh air, a moment where she could feel like her own person. She didn't decide to run right then. But the idea settled in her heart quietly, like a tiny spark waiting for the right moment. That evening, when she sat down for dinner, her father barely spoke. He ate quickly and returned to his work. Emily sat alone at the table, staring at her plate, thinking about the life she was living versus the life she wanted. The difference between them felt too wide to ignore. When she finished cleaning the dishes, she stepped outside. The air was cooler, and the sky had shades of pink and orange. She walked to the edge of the field, letting her bare feet feel the dirt. She closed her eyes and imagined running not out of anger, but out of hope, out of a desire to find herself. She didn't know when the moment would come. She didn't know where she would go. She only knew that something inside her had shifted. And once it shifted, it couldn't shift back. Emily turned around slowly, looking at the farm she had known her whole life. She cared about it. She cared about her father. But she also cared about herself. And for the first time, that felt important. She walked back inside, knowing deep down that a day was coming soon, a day when she would no longer remain where she felt so small, a day when her quiet life would no longer be enough, and she would run toward something new, even if she didn't yet know what that new beginning would look like. And when that day arrived, she would take her first step barefoot, guided only by courage, hope, and the belief that she deserved more than a life lived in silence. The day after Emily felt that quiet shift inside her, the farm seemed unusually tense, as if the land itself sensed something was about to change. The morning started like any other. Birds chirped in the trees, the sun rose slowly over the fields, and the soft breeze brushed against the tall grass. But Emily felt different, and that difference stayed with her as she moved through her morning chores. She woke early, even earlier than her father, unable to sleep long because her mind was full. Every thought circled around the same question. How long could she stay in a place where she never felt heard? She tried to push the thoughts aside as she got dressed and stepped outside into the cool morning air. Her father, Walter, came out a few minutes later. He gave her a small nod, the kind he always gave, but he didn't say anything. He went straight to work, and Emily followed. They fed the chickens, cleaned the stalls, and checked the fences. They worked side by side, but there was still that unspoken distance between them, a distance made of years of silence and misunderstandings. By midday, the sun was high and bright. Emily was repairing a section of wooden fence, while her father tried to fix a machine near the barn. It was the same machine that had troubled him the day before. She could hear him muttering to himself as he worked, frustration building in his voice. She kept her eyes on her task, trying to stay calm and focused. But the tension on the farm felt heavier than usual, like a weight pressing down on both of them. She wished her father would talk to her, tell her what was bothering him, or even just ask how she was doing. But he didn't, and she didn't know how to begin the conversation either. At one point, the sound of the machine stopping abruptly made her look up. Walter rubbed his forehead, then tried again. The machine sputtered, but refused to start. He sighed and stepped back, staring at it for a long moment. Emily knew he was tired. She knew the farm meant everything to him, and she also knew he didn't know how to express the stress he felt. She decided to help him by bringing a tool she thought he might need. She walked toward him, holding it out carefully. "Maybe this will work," she said softly. Walter glanced at her, nodded once, and took the tool. "Thanks," he said. But his voice was distant. She stood there for a moment, waiting to see if he would say anything else. But when he turned back to the machine without another word, she slowly stepped away and returned to her work. The small interaction should have made her feel appreciated, but instead, it reminded her how little they connected. As the day continued, clouds began to gather in the sky, spreading a light shadow across the fields. It looked like rain might come later, and the air felt heavy. Emily tried to focus, but her thoughts kept drifting. Every unspoken word, every cold silence, every moment where she wished things were different, it all began to build inside her. By late afternoon, she and her father needed to move several boxes of supplies from one storage shed to another. The boxes weren't too heavy, but the task required both of them. Emily lifted her side carefully, but her grip was slightly off, and the box tilted for a second. She steadied it quickly, but the moment was long enough for her father to notice. "Watch it," Walter said sharply, not loudly, just sharply enough that it stung. Emily swallowed. "I'm trying," she said quietly. He didn't respond. They walked the rest of the way in silence. When they set the box down inside the shed, he let out a long breath, not angry, just tired, but the sound felt like another reminder that she could never seem to do anything right in his eyes. She tried to help with another box, but her mind wasn't fully focused anymore. She picked it up too fast, and the corner brushed against the edge of a wooden shelf. It made a soft thump, nothing broke, nothing serious, but Walter turned around quickly. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice firm, though not loud. Emily froze. Her hands tightened around the box. She felt a wave of emotion rush through her: sadness, frustration, a quiet ache she had been holding in for years. "I'm helping," she whispered, but her voice trembled. Walter didn't seem to notice her tone. He just rubbed his forehead again and mumbled something she couldn't fully hear. Maybe it was about the farm, or the work, or the stress he carried. But to Emily, it felt like he was saying she was making the day harder. That was the moment when her heart finally reached its breaking point, not because he said something cruel, but because she realized nothing would ever change if she stayed. She could spend her whole life trying to be helpful, trying to be seen, trying to be enough. But the farm would always come first for her father, and her voice would always be the quietest thing in the room. She stepped outside the shed, needing air. The clouds had grown darker now, and the wind had picked up. The fields stretched out endlessly before her, looking almost inviting. She looked down at her bare feet and felt the rough earth beneath them. Something inside her whispered that this was the moment right now when she needed to choose herself. She took one deep breath, then she ran. It wasn't planned. It wasn't discussed. It wasn't thought out. Her feet simply moved, carrying her across the open field, faster than she had ever run before. She didn't look back at first. She just felt the wind on her face, the ground under her feet, and the tightness in her chest slowly loosening with every step. Her breath came out in quick bursts as she ran past the old fence, past the grazing horses, past everything she had known her entire life. It felt strange, wild, and freeing all at once. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed to go. After a few seconds, she heard her father call her name. His voice wasn't angry. It was surprised. She stumbled a little but kept running. She didn't turn around. She didn't stop. She didn't let herself think. If she stopped, she knew she might lose the courage that had just ignited inside her. The ground was uneven, and the dry grass brushed against her ankles. The wind pulled her hair back, and her heart raced faster and faster. She felt tears forming, not from sadness this time, but from the overwhelming energy surging through her. For the first time in her life, she was running toward something she chose, even if she didn't know what it was. She was running toward freedom, toward space to breathe, room to think, and a chance to understand herself better. Behind her, the farm grew smaller and smaller, until it was nothing more than a distant shape. And Emily, barefoot and breathless, kept going, guided not by fear, but by hope. Hope that somewhere ahead, her life could change. Hope that she could finally be seen. Hope that she could find a place where she belonged. And with every step she took across that wide-open land, she felt herself moving closer to the beginning of something new, something she had been waiting for her whole life without even realizing it. Emily kept running, even though her legs had started to feel heavy. The wide-open field stretched before her like a path she had never explored. Her breath came out in short, quick gasps, and the wind brushed past her face as she pushed herself forward. She had never run this far from the farm, never crossed this part of the land on foot. But now, everything felt possible. She just knew she had to keep going. The sky above her was a mix of light and dark clouds, moving slowly across the horizon. It looked like rain might come later, but for now the air was only cool and full of dust kicked up by her steps. Emily didn't care about the dust on her skin or the small rocks poking her bare feet. All that mattered was the feeling of freedom the feeling of moving away from a life that had held her in place for so long. She didn't know how long she had been running, 5 minutes, 10, maybe more. Time felt strange when her heart was racing this fast. At one point, she slowed down a little to catch her breath. She bent forward with her hands on her knees and tried to steady herself. The wind was stronger now, blowing strands of her hair into her face. She pushed them aside, stood upright again, and kept moving, though not as fast as before. She didn't hear anything behind her anymore. No footsteps, no voice calling her name, no sound from the farm. It was just her and the open land. For the first time in her life, she felt as if she truly belonged to herself. Far away, on the other side of the field, a horse trotted slowly along the path. Its rider was a young cowboy named Caleb Rivers. He worked at the neighboring ranch, the Turner Ranch, where he spent most of his days tending cattle, fixing fences, and helping with the horses. Caleb enjoyed the quiet of the land. He liked the slow pace of life and the feeling of calm that came from being around animals. He had just finished his shift for the day and was riding home. The air smelled of grass and dust, and the gentle rhythm of the horse made him relax. But up ahead, something caught his eye, a small figure moving quickly across the field. At first, he thought it might be an animal. But then he saw the shape more clearly. It was a girl. And she was running. Caleb slowed his horse, leaning forward slightly. He didn't recognize her from this distance, but he saw that she was barefoot and stumbling a little. Something about the way she moved told him she wasn't just running for exercise or fun. She looked like she was running away from something, or maybe running toward something, though he couldn't tell which. His horse stopped on its own as Caleb watched her. The girl looked tired, her clothes dusty, her hair blowing wildly. Caleb felt concern rising inside him. He wasn't the type to interfere in other people's business, but he also wasn't the type to ride past someone who might be in trouble. "Easy, boy," he murmured to his horse, patting its side gently. He guided the horse forward slowly, not wanting to startle her. When he got a little closer, he called out, "Hey, are you all right?" Emily heard a voice behind her. It wasn't her father's voice. It was softer, calmer, and she felt her heart jolt with surprise. She turned her head quickly and saw a young man on horseback, riding toward her. His hat shielded his eyes from the sun, and he sat tall and steady. She panicked for a second, unsure if she should run faster or stop. She didn't know who he was, and she didn't know what he wanted, but she didn't have the energy to run again. Her legs were heavy, her breathing uneven, and her feet hurt more than she had realized. Caleb noticed her hesitation. He raised one hand to show her he meant no harm. "It's okay," he said gently. "I'm not going to bother you. I just want to know if you're all right." Emily tried to speak, but her throat felt dry. She took a few steps backward, watching him carefully. Her heart was still racing, and she didn't know if she could trust him. She had never seen him before, but something in his voice sounded safe, steady, warm, and genuinely worried. "I'm fine," she finally said, though it didn't sound convincing. Her voice shook a little. I needed to go." Caleb nodded, not pushing for more. "All right," he said softly. "But you look tired. Do you need water?" "I have some." I have some." Emily didn't answer right away. Her breathing was uneven, and she could feel her knees trembling. She tried to take a step backward, but her foot slipped on the uneven ground, and she almost fell. She caught herself at the last second, but it was clear she was exhausted. Caleb carefully climbed down from his horse, making sure not to move too fast. He didn't want her to feel pressured. He pulled a small water bottle from his saddlebag and held it out. "Here," he said, stepping only close enough for her to take it if she wanted it. Emily hesitated, but her throat felt painfully dry. She reached out slowly and took the bottle. "Thank you," she whispered. She opened it and took a small sip. The cool water felt like relief, spreading through her chest. She took another sip, then lowered the bottle and tried to catch her breath again. Caleb studied her from a respectful distance. He could tell she had been through something difficult, but he didn't want to ask questions she wasn't ready to answer. Instead, he waited patiently. After a moment, he asked quietly, "Do you live nearby?" Emily nodded. "Back there," she said, pointing toward the direction of her father's farm. Her hand shook a little as she lowered it. Caleb followed her gaze. "That's the Hart farm, right?" She nodded again. He didn't say anything for a moment. He didn't want to guess her situation or make her uncomfortable. Instead, he simply asked, "Do you want to sit down for a minute?" Emily looked around. There was a small patch of soft grass nearby. She didn't feel like she could stand much longer, so she slowly sat down, the water bottle still in her hand. Caleb stayed standing at first, giving her space. She tried to steady her breathing. She tried to slow her heartbeat. But the emotions she had been holding inside all day came rushing back: fear, sadness, frustration, and the overwhelming need to be free. Caleb finally sat down a short distance away. "You don't have to tell me anything," he said gently. "But if you want to talk, I'm here." Emily looked at him. For a moment, she didn't say anything. Then her eyes softened slightly. She didn't tell him everything, but she told him enough that she felt trapped at home, that she needed to leave for a while, that she didn't know where she was going. Caleb listened quietly, not interrupting once. He didn't judge her or ask unnecessary questions. He simply nodded now and then to show he understood. When she finished talking, she felt lighter, even though her situation hadn't changed. She had never talked to anyone like this before, someone who listened without brushing her feelings aside. Caleb stood again and reached for something from his saddlebag. "You look like you've walked a long way," he said with a soft smile. "If you need help getting somewhere safe, I can take you." Emily's eyes widened slightly. Her legs were shaking too much to keep going on her own. She looked down at her dusty feet, then up at Caleb. For the first time since she started running, she felt she wasn't alone. She didn't know where he would take her. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing: this moment, when a cowboy slowed down his horse to help a tired, barefoot girl running across the fields, was the first step toward a new chapter in her life, and she felt ready to take it. Emily sat on the soft grass, trying to slow her breathing. The cool wind touched her skin gently, and her heartbeat, which had been racing since she first started running, finally began to calm a little. Caleb stood beside his horse, watching her with quiet concern. He did not rush her or pressure her. He simply waited, giving her the space she needed to gather herself. After a few minutes, he took a slow step closer. "You all right?" he asked again, his voice calm and steady. Emily nodded, though she still felt shaky. "I think so," she whispered. She looked down at her dusty feet. They were sore and scratched from running, but she hadn't noticed the pain when she was full of adrenaline. Now, though, her legs felt drained, and her feet felt tender against the ground. She tried to stand, but the moment she put weight on her feet, her knees trembled, and she lowered herself back down. Caleb noticed. "You shouldn't walk right now," he said softly. "You look tired. Really tired." Emily lowered her head, feeling embarrassed. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," she murmured. "You're not causing trouble," Caleb replied immediately. He shook his head lightly, as if he wanted to make sure she knew he meant it. "You just look like you've had a hard day. Anyone would be tired." Emily looked up at him, studying his expression. His eyes were gentle, warm, and steady. She didn't know him at all, but something about him felt safe. Not safe in a loud, dramatic way, just safe in the quiet sense that he cared enough to ask how she was doing. Caleb stepped toward his horse and gently whispered something to calm the animal. Then he turned to Emily again. "I'm going to help you get up," he said. But he didn't move until she nodded. She nodded slowly. He walked over and offered her his hand. She took it carefully, and he helped her stand. But the moment she tried to put weight on her feet again, her legs gave out slightly. Caleb steadied her before she could stumble too far. "You can't walk like this," he said softly. "You'll hurt yourself." Emily looked out across the wide fields. There was no shelter nearby, no water except the little she had left, and no way she could make it far on her own. Her father's farm was behind her, and she wasn't ready to go back. She needed direction, support just for a little while until she could think clearly again. Where can I go?" she asked quietly, almost in a whisper. Caleb didn't answer right away. He looked out at the open land, then back at her. "There's the Turner Ranch," he said finally. "It's not too far from here. The Turner family is kind. They help people when they can. You can rest there. Get something to eat. Maybe wash up. No one will ask you questions unless you want to talk." Emily felt a small wave of relief inside her. She didn't want to be somewhere crowded or noisy. She didn't want to explain every detail of her life. She just wanted a safe place to rest her tired feet and her tired heart. Caleb watched her expression carefully. "It's your choice," he said. "I just want to make sure you're safe." Emily nodded again, this time a little stronger. "Okay," she said. I think that sounds good." Caleb smiled gently. "All right." He walked toward his horse and prepared the saddle. Then he returned to Emily and crouched down a little so she could get on more easily. "I'll help you up," he said softly. "Just hold on to me, and I'll lift you." Emily hesitated for a moment, then placed her hands carefully on his shoulders. Caleb lifted her with steady, gentle strength, making sure not to hurt her or move too fast. He settled her safely on the horse's back, then climbed up behind her to guide the horse. Once they were both seated, he clicked his tongue softly, and the horse began to walk. The rhythm of the horse's steps was slow and comforting, rocking Emily gently as they moved across the field. At first, she sat stiffly, unsure if she was doing it right, but after a few minutes, she relaxed slightly. Caleb made sure to keep a respectful distance, guiding the reins without crowding her. The wind brushed her face lightly as the horse carried her farther from the life she had known. Neither of them spoke for a few moments. The quiet wasn't uncomfortable, it was peaceful, almost soothing. After a while, Caleb broke the silence. "Do you want to tell me a little more about what happened?" he asked quietly. "Only if you want to." Emily took a deep breath. Her voice was soft. "It's just, home is hard. My dad works a lot. He doesn't talk. I feel invisible." She paused, searching for the right words. "I know he cares in his own way, but I feel like I never get to live my own life. And today it felt like too much." Caleb listened without interrupting. He nodded slowly as she spoke, letting her know he understood. "Sometimes," he said after a thoughtful pause, "you reach a point where you need a little space to breathe. That doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means you're human." Emily looked ahead, watching the land stretch out before them. Her heart felt a little lighter, hearing his words. "Thank you," she said softly. Caleb smiled. "You don't have to thank me. Anyone would want to help." But Emily wasn't sure that was true. Not everyone would stop for a stranger running across the fields. Not everyone would offer water, stay calm, or bring her somewhere safe. She felt grateful, even if she couldn't say the words loudly yet. The sky began to change colors as the sun started dipping lower. Shades of gold, soft pink, and light purple spread across the horizon. It was beautiful, and Emily realized she had never seen the world look quite like this, not from a horse, not from this side of the land, and not with her heart feeling this open. As they got closer to the Turner Ranch, Emily could see the outline of the buildings. A big barn, a modest house, and some fencing around the fields. Warm lights glowed in a few windows, giving the place a welcoming, peaceful appearance. Caleb pointed gently. "We're almost there," he said. Emily nodded. She felt nervous, but also relieved. She didn't know the Turners, but the ranch felt like a safe place, a place where she could think clearly and maybe understand what she wanted for her future. When they reached the ranch yard, Caleb stopped the horse and carefully helped Emily down. Her feet touched the ground gently, and although they still hurt, they felt a little stronger now after the ride. The Turner family came out to greet them, Mr. and Mrs. Turner, both warm, calm, and kind in their manner. They didn't rush toward her or ask rapid questions. They simply smiled and welcomed her gently, as if she were someone they had known for a long time. Caleb introduced her without giving personal details. "This is Emily," he said softly. "She needs a place to rest." Mrs. Turner nodded kindly. "Of course she does," she said. "You look tired." Emily felt tears fill her eyes, not from sadness now, but from the shock of kindness. She had run barefoot across half the field, feeling alone and scared. Yet here she was, standing among strangers who treated her with warmth and care. As she followed Mrs. Turner inside, Caleb stayed behind for a moment, watching her with a gentle, reassuring expression. He didn't know what her next steps would be, and neither did she, but he knew he was glad he had been in the right place at the right time. Emily stepped through the doorway, feeling like she was walking into a new beginning. The days after the storm felt strangely quiet for Rose. She was staying in the small guest room of Luke's ranch house, a room that smelled faintly of old wood and fresh laundry. The morning sun slipped in through the window every day, warming the blanket at her feet. And each time she opened her eyes, she felt a soft sense of surprise. She was safe. She did not have to run anymore. She did not hear angry footsteps outside her door. She was not waiting for a shout or a command. Instead, she heard the calm sounds of the ranch coming to life, horses snorting, boots tapping, and Luke humming to himself in the kitchen as he made breakfast. Yet even with all this peace, Rose felt a mix of emotions. She was grateful, but she was also afraid of the future. She had run from her father's farm, and she knew that meant she had changed her life forever. She could not simply go back and behave as if nothing had happened. She had stepped onto a new path. One she had not planned. One she did not fully understand. Luke seemed to sense her feelings without her saying a single word. He didn't push her, didn't hurry her to make decisions, and didn't try to fill her quiet moments with questions. Instead, he gave her space. And somehow that helped her more than anything else. Every day, he invited her to join him in the ranch chores, telling her she could watch or help, whichever she preferred. At first, she only watched. But soon she found herself enjoying the simple tasks: brushing the horses, pouring feed, sweeping the barn floor. These small moments brought her a kind of peace she hadn't felt in years. One afternoon, while they were repairing a fence together, Luke finally asked the question he had kept inside for days. "Rose, what do you want to do now?" His words were gentle, almost careful, as if he didn't want to break the trust she had slowly built with him. Rose paused with the wooden plank in her hands. She looked at the open fields, stretching far into the horizon. The sky was wide, soft, and endless, so different from the crowded days she had lived before. "I don't know yet," she admitted softly. "I only know that I don't want to go back to the way things were. I want to live in peace. I want to make my own choices." Luke nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You deserve that. And whatever choice you make, you won't have to face it alone." Under 40. Under 44 blind. 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 Those words touched her deeply. They felt like a warm blanket wrapped around her heart. For the first time in a long while, she believed someone truly meant it. Weeks passed, and Rose slowly settled into a new rhythm. She started helping around the house, cooking meals with Luke, and learning how to take care of the animals with more confidence. The ranch became more than just a place of shelter. It became a place where she began discovering herself. She found out she was patient, stronger than she ever knew, and surprisingly good with animals, especially the quiet, nervous horses that others struggled to calm. Luke watched her with quiet admiration, never saying too much, but always standing nearby in case she needed anything. Over time, she came to rely on his steady presence. She trusted him. a rare and precious feeling she didn't give lightly. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun dip behind the hills, Rose felt something shift inside her. The wind brushed gently through her hair, and the colors of the sunset glowed across the sky like soft paint. It was in that peaceful moment that she realized something important. She had not just escaped her old life. She had stepped into a new one shaped by her own choices and courage. She turned to Luke quietly. "Thank you for everything. You helped me when I didn't even know how to ask for help." Luke looked surprised at first, then smiled the soft, sincere smile she had come to recognize. "You don't have to thank me, Rose. I just did what felt right. And I'm proud of you. You're stronger than you think." Her eyes softened, her heart settling into a warm calm. She knew life ahead would not always be easy. There would be challenges, decisions, and days when she would feel unsure. But she also knew she wasn't alone anymore. She had found safety, friendship, freedom, and perhaps something even deeper, hope. And so, the girl who once ran barefoot through the night, terrified and desperate, now sat quietly beside a man who had carried her to safety. The open fields stretched before her, full of possibilities she had yet to explore. Her journey had just begun, and she was ready to face it, step by step, with light in her heart and strength in her spirit. Her story would no longer be one of fear. It would be one of courage, new beginnings, and a future she chose for herself.